Authors are human, right? Everybody agrees on that. And editors are human, or redactors are human. But the idea in historical criticism is this final document. Let's just call this the Joseph narrative. Let's divide it into 4 parts. The Yahwistic author, the Elohist this, the Deuteronomist this, and the priestly source that. And isn't that what source criticism basically does? You ask yourself, how can we reliably know? Let's say chapter 37, verse 1a was written by the Yahwistic source because, the divine name is being used there. Because it uses, some word for tree that belongs to an earlier in Israel's history. How do we know, though, that 37:1b beta was written by the Elohistic source? Well, we know probably doesn't use Elohim in that close of a place, but it uses, a word for a rock that's different from the word that the Yahwist uses. We find in 37:1c, Deuteronomist appears, and we know because he uses the word sin, and that belongs to a much later, category of history. And then the priestly source, 37:2, uses a term that's patently, like it's obviously of northern provenance. This belongs to Hezekiah's reforms. We see the same word. What does that presuppose about authors? It presupposes that they're perfect and that they're consistent. That everywhere and in everything the Yahwistic source has ever written, he uses the same words in the same way. He spells them the same. His sentence structure is the same. And so if the Yahwist has a preference for verb, subject, object, but the Elohist has a preference for a verbless clause followed by a prepositional phrase that serves as the object, they always write that way. They're perfectly consistent. So how, when you butt this narrative up to another one, how do we know where one legend ends and another begins? Well, it's because the editors make all kinds of mistakes. It's because they forget to cleanly connect the last word to the first word of this narrative with the appropriate conjunction. Or they forget to smooth out the syntax, or maybe, and this is close to an unpardonable sin, they repeat over here something that was already said over here. And those silly editors, who are also human, are totally inconsistent. They are fraught with mistakes. They have all kinds of problems. Therefore, it's easy to tell what an author wrote because he's perfectly consistent. It's also easy to tell what an editor did because his inconsistencies make the seams in the narrative obvious to us. Wybry is really credited with pointing this out. It's become my favorite hobby horse in the study of criticism, is this inconsistency between saying authors are perfectly consistent, but we can identify the editors by virtue of their mistakes.